Hello and welcome to ReverieTrueCrime. I'm your host, Paige. In today's episode, we are diving into the baffling disappearance of Henry McCabe, a Liberian immigrant and respected auditor in Minnesota. Henry's life, marked by resilience through Liberia's civil war and a pursuit of the American dream, took a dark turn in the early hours of September 7, 2015. After a night out with friends, he vanished under very mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a disturbing voicemail that has since left investigators and the public alike horrified and bewildered. Let's venture through a maze of misinformation, suspicions, and eventual evidence that will keep your mind reeling. This episode is centered around the life of Henry McCabe, a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and a community's desperate search for the truth. Let's get started. Henry Toby McCabe was a Liberian immigrant living in Mounds View, Minnesota. He worked as an auditor for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Henry was an honor student at his alma mater, California State University, and a member of Beta Alpha Psi, an international honor organization for financial information. Henry survived 14 years of civil war in Liberia before he migrated to America. Lovetta Tugbay of the Coalition for Justice in Liberia described Henry as a very well-educated family man. Henry was also a public speaker who knew how to gain the attention of crowds that he spoke to. He was thought highly of by his colleagues. They said Henry really had a determination to succeed professionally and personally, but he never thought he was better than the next person, and he was very giving. In his spare time, Henry played soccer with a team called the East Coast Stars, and anytime he was on the sidelines with his teammates, he would tell jokes and make everyone laugh to keep his teammates' spirits up. In 2015, Henry was on the cusp of turning 32 years old, and for 11 years had been married to his wife, Corrine. They had 2 little girls, the oldest was 10, and the youngest was around 1 or 2. Henry enjoyed being social and he loved his job, although Henry did have the desire to, at some point, go back to Liberia to be in politics like his father. Henry was passionate about where he was from and was very involved in the local Liberian community. Going back to Henry's father, he was assassinated. Someone poisoned him, and that's reportedly when Henry and his brother Timothy were made to come to America, where they would be safe. A little later, we'll circle back to this. Now, even though Henry was, by most accounts, a great man who was respected, he had issues in his marriage, and he wasn't always faithful to Corrine. Like a lot of us, he also struggled with depression and the stress of work. It was rumored that he recently had a bad review at work, and he had a lot on his plate to deal with. As life goes, sometimes when it rains, it pours. Along with that, some people claim that Corrine was a jealous and dangerous wife. In September of 2015, Corrine claims that she and her 2 children were in California, where Corrine had been working for quite some time, and she was supposedly prepping for the family to move there that month. On September 6, 2015, it was Labor Day weekend, and actually 10 days before Henry's 32nd birthday. He and his friend William Kennedy were hanging out at a barbecue thrown by a man named Emmanuel. Afterwards, Henry invited William over to his apartment to hang out. So after the barbecue, William followed behind Henry around 10 or 11 that night, and they chilled out for a bit before deciding to go out to a club in Spring Lake Park. That club is now closed down, but it was called Pavlitsky's. On their way, Henry got William to stop at an ATM where he withdrew about $200 at 11:24 p.m. When they arrived at the club, their friends Calvin Johnson and Jonathan Thomas, known as JT, were also at the club. By their accounts, Henry was drinking quite a lot that night. So much so, his friends held onto his wallet and keys to ensure that he didn't try to drive home. There are also discrepancies when it comes to the wallet. One of the guys said Henry gave his wallet to JT because he had forgotten JT's birthday and something about owing JT a favor. After they were done clubbing, Henry went out to William's car around 1:40 in the morning on the 7th, according to their friend Calvin Johnson. When William got into the car, he said Henry was on the phone with someone. It seemed like he was in an argument, and he figured it was Corrine on the other end of the line. William was going to take Henry home, but Henry told him he wanted to be dropped off at a gas station nearby. William did just that, and it would be the last time that anyone saw Henry alive. That is, according to so-called friends and family. Around 2:28 a.m. on September 7th, Corrine received a phone call from Henry. Newspapers report that Corrine said she could only hear what seemed to be moaning and growling. However, what's even stranger is that Corrine heard those horrible sounds and then she went back to sleep. She didn't seem too worried about it when it happened. After calling Corrine, Henry made a phone call, or possibly an accidental call, to his brother. His brother Timothy's phone went to voicemail. The voicemail message that was left by Henry sounds horrifying. No one can seem to agree on what these sounds on this voicemail are, but it is considered disturbing to a lot of people. If you'd like to skip ahead about 3 minutes, this is the time to do so. Here's the voicemail that was on Timothy's phone. So, what did you hear in that voice message? I'm definitely interested in hearing your thoughts. Corrine reported Henry missing later on September 7th. After the calls, Henry's phone disconnected. Volunteers and police began combing the area for Henry, and an investigation was underway. Around October 1st, still no sign of Henry. Stick a pin in the fact that on October 1st, the FBI got involved in what was a missing persons case. The FBI will get involved in missing persons cases at the request of state or local law enforcement. But a lot of people thought that was a little weird that the FBI was brought in so early if there weren't any suspicions about people in Henry's circle. The first issue to arise was Henry's friend William Papoose Kennedy's story that he dropped Henry off at a gas station called Super America. When the surveillance footage was pulled from that gas station, there were no sightings at all on September 7th of William or Henry. However, at another gas station called Holiday, they did have surveillance footage that showed what looked like William's vehicle dropping off a man who did look like Henry McCabe. William claimed he just got confused as to which gas station he dropped Henry off at that night. He eventually said he wished he never would have given Henry a ride at all, and proclaimed that he had nothing to do with his disappearance. The investigation uncovered that the last pings from Henry's phone showed that he was in the area of Creekview Park in New Brighton, Minnesota, around 6 miles away from the Holiday gas station. Days turned into weeks, and still no one could find Henry. What I have not seen released in the news is a piece of information uncovered on the YouTube channel The In-Between. The host has an incredible episode about this case that I highly recommend. She found what a lot of people didn't know at the time and still may not know. On October 1st, the New Brighton Police Department received an anonymous letter that was sent out of St. Paul, Minnesota. It stated, "Henry McCabe, his body, next to water, partially buried. Need search dogs to find witnesses who saw burial. Scared female, young, asked to come forward. Can remain anonymous. Will protect." This letter was sent off for DNA analysis to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, but there was not enough DNA on that letter to test. This could be why FBI got involved on October 1st, and a lot of people just didn't know why. Because as far as I've seen, this information is not in any newspapers or articles that I could find. So I believe the host of The In-Between on YouTube might have went to the police department and filed a FOIA request, possibly, to get this information. On October 16, 2015, Fox 9 Minneapolis-St. Paul came out with a one-on-one interview with Corinne McCabe. A few days before this, a dive team searched a few bodies of water where Henry's phone had last pinged, with no luck. Corinne said, quote, "From day to day, it's sort of like a roller coaster," end quote. Mounds View Police Chief Thomas Kinney said they were not able to rule out any scenario at that point, even the possibility of Henry leaving the country to possibly go back to Liberia. Corinne told Fox 9 there was just no possibility that Henry left the country because he didn't have a passport. About the voicemail that was on Henry's brother's phone, Corinne stated, quote, "I wondered if something had been put in his drink, how coherent he may have been. All of these questions ran through my mind. He said certain words like, 'They are afraid.' One word he said was police. The other word that he said at the beginning of the audio was papoose," end quote. Remember, Papoose is William's middle name. Corinne said she didn't understand why William would have dropped anyone off at a gas station at 2 in the morning. She also explained that Henry had never experimented with drugs, and his favorite thing to do was listen to the podcast Intelligence Squared, and he would watch their live shows where they gather influential thinkers from around the world and they have debates. So he wasn't that much of a partier. A little over a week after Corrine spoke to the news station, KARE 11 reported that the Minnesota Community Police had been hired by Corrine to help search for her husband. David Singleton, the leader of that nonprofit organization, which had promised a $10,000 reward for information that led to Henry, said Corrine McCabe was withholding information. Quote, "She is purposefully withholding information that we believe could lead to the location and recovery of Henry McCabe. We feel like we have all been misled. We have an ethical and moral obligation to the community and to this organization to do the right thing." End quote. From there, the $10,000 reward money was off the table. Only a few days after she had hired them, David released an audio recording that the public had not yet heard. According to blogtalkradio.com/hackerforhire, quote, "Approximately a week after Henry was reported missing, his wife Corrine went to the website hackerforhire.com and called the number listed. Hackerforhire.com has performed various types of investigations for individuals, couples, athletes, entertainers, companies, attorneys, and law enforcement from around the world. This would not be the first time for someone to request a missing persons case. Everyone in the hackerforhire.com office uses the name Don, or the full name Don T. Hack Me, which stands for Don't Hack Me. On this day, when the Hacker for Hire team was away at training, world-renowned cybersecurity expert and ex-computer hacker Gregory Evans, GregoryDEvans.com, the owner and founder of HackerForHire.com, answered the phone. A woman who identified herself as Henry's wife, Corrine Wade McCabe, was on the other end. She wanted to know if Hacker for Hire could ping his cell phone or use some form of technology to find her husband. In the conversation between Gregory and Corrine, she first described her marriage as a loving relationship. She told Mr. Evans that she was going to be moving from Minnesota to California that same month Henry could not be found. End quote. Again, that's from blogtalkradio.com/hackerforhire. He was supposed to release more audio recordings, but he stopped uploading. I'd really like to know more of what he uncovered. Corrine told Gregory Evans, the cybersecurity expert, that when Henry went missing, she was in California. And she said at the time of that conversation with Gregory that she was back in California. This was almost a month after Henry had gone missing. She contacted Hacker for Hire because she said she didn't feel like authorities were doing all they could to find Henry. Only about 48 hours after the first phone call that I'm going to play for you in just a minute, Gregory Evans felt that something was off. In the months following, Gregory had to try his best to get to the bottom of why things were not lining up to him. So, over the next 3 months or so, he recorded conversations, kept emails, text messages, and interviews that he had with Henry's family and police. Henry's family and friends sometimes refer to Henry by his other name, which is Joseph. So put a pin in that if you need to. The Hacker for Hire team had a website which was hackerforhiremurders.com, but it no longer exists. After some digging, someone found the website through the web archive and posted it to a forum on WebSleuth where they were discussing the case. Gregory Evans and the Hacker for Hire team found through these conversations the following, as listed on the now defunct website. Number 1. Corrine did not have a loving relationship with Henry, and they were actually getting a divorce. Number 2. She was not in California when Henry went missing, but was in Minnesota at the time he disappeared, using a spoofed Google number to make it seem like she was in California, according to these cybersecurity experts. Number 3. Corrine went to the lengths of installing spyware on Henry's phone around 2009 and was still using it to see his text messages, emails, and location at all times. The week Henry disappeared, he had reset his phone and cleaned out the spyware. That probably made Corrine really angry. Number 4. Henry had taken Corrine off of his life insurance policy. The week Henry disappeared, suddenly Corrine was on the life insurance policy again. The signature on the paperwork was not Henry's. Number 5. Corrine had a relationship previously with the last person Henry had been with, William Papoose Kennedy. As mentioned by the website, Henry's story was all over the news, but the media source of information, besides the responses that police would give, was Corrine. So the information that has been printed in the newspapers and news articles online is hard to completely trust when most of it has come from one of the sketchiest sources. In Gregory Evans' possession are over 30 hours of Henry and Corrine's recorded conversations, text messages between the two, Henry's GPS coordinates from his cell phone, recorded calls with Henry's family, the police, and David Singleton, who decided to release the following audio clip to the news because he had enough of Corrine and her story constantly changing. Also, the link to the now archived Hacker for Hire website will be in the show notes, so definitely head over there and check out all of the screenshots and information that they have. A lot of the text messages that involve Henry, the contact name in Corrine's phone is Joseph. In a phone conversation that Gregory had with Henry's brother Timothy, he explains about Henry's name Joseph. Be sure to go listen to that on Gregory Evans' YouTube channel. I would love for Gregory Evans to start uploading the audio again so we can know what we don't know. Now you're about to hear Corrine talking to Henry's mother, brother, other family members, and David Singleton. This is the recording that was released to the news.
Let's end this stuff.
I mean, if I was gonna get it, if I was
that won't be earnest for you, for God's sake.
Found it by now.
Yes. Yeah. So no, carry it home. A lot of people believe he's alive.
I just want to say
That's
this,
true.
and it's what I said to say on, and it was probably relayed to David. I can't tell you what I know. However, I do know based on some evidence that I have that people have.
You know, we are personally suffering.
Let me say this. I understand that you're suffering. Remember, you were the one on the prayer line that said that we should pray every day. Remember?
Every day.
Yes, and since then we have prayed every day. That first time we got in the prayer line, it was the 17th of September. We got in the prayer line. We said we were going to fast and pray for 48 hours. The first prayer that we prayed and Lavetta prayed on that line was that God should show us the answer in 7 days. 7 days later, God showed. Exactly. I can't tell anybody. You know why? Because then people would stop looking for me. And I'm going to find my husband. So every Saturday, I go out in the bush when I know he's somewhere else. You know why? Because I'm going to find my husband. I get on the news, and I tell them what? I'm looking for my husband. You know why? Because I'm going to find him.
If you have a place we can find him, let's go find him.
One thing you're not understanding, I know my husband. I understand the way he thinks. I know what he's thinking right now. why we have to have media attention is because as soon as this dies down, he will feel like it's okay to leave the country.
It is not going to die
He's
down.
still here in
If you
America.
say-
Until we find him.
He
you
is still
say,
here in America.
I believe
The
he's
Liberian
alive.
consulate says that he does not have an ECOWAS passport either under his American name or his PC name. I've been monitoring people. I know who's involved. I know who I suspect is involved. I have to be very careful. And I have to make sure that every Saturday I'm out there looking for my husband, because the minute the media thinks that he's alive, they're going to say, why are you guys out here? What are you guys doing?
Yeah,
Right.
We don't.
There was a time around the end of September, I was almost certain.
You know how I'm sorry.
I was almost
trying to
certain.
call you up,
I knew
but
where he
feel
was.
like my fast and prayer, and I announced that.
Tell you, hold on, but let me say this. It was around the end of September. You guys were the ones that read to me in the Bible about the guy who fasted for 21 days, and his answer had already arrived, but what? It was stopped by Satan. There's another thing that's going on. I know who my husband would have gone to. The problem is, when I gave that information to the police, they messed it up. The police messed it up.
So why
If
are
I
you
hadn't,
telling the
hold
police?
on, if I hadn't told them what I told them and instead done something else, this would be finished. My husband is not where he was now. I don't know where he is. I have an idea where he is, but I can't say to anyone, not even the police, because until I have proof.
But meanwhile,
You see-
the whole group is lying
Okay, now
to
you have-
everybody, pretending we're looking for Henry in the bush and wherever we're looking, knowing, according to you, that he's alive and well, maybe, somewhere.
What I have, until I can look my husband in the eyes and say, you idiot, there's still a question. Did something happen to my husband? Until I can look him or take a picture or see a film or hear his voice on the phone, there's still the question.
So,
Did something
Corrine McCabe told KARE 11 News that from the beginning she has told authorities the truth. Corrine claimed that she fired the Minnesota Community Police and hired a new agency that better fits the needs of her family. She also said she gave information to Mounds View Police that could help lead them to Henry. KARE 11 news station sent Corrine a copy of the recording through email and text message. She conveniently was not able to open the file and therefore could not confirm if she was the woman on the audio recording or not. Like I said, Gregory Evans does have a YouTube channel with more audio recordings, which I will link in the show notes, so be sure to go and listen to those. Every time he speaks with Corrine, her story changes. He also talks to Henry's brother Timothy, as well as William Papoose Kennedy. I'm not too sure what to think of Corrine McCabe, Calvin Johnson, JT, William, or anyone else around Henry. I'm also not sure if any of them had a hand in what happened to Henry. Do I think Corrine could have had a motive and people around her who would be willing to help? Yes, I do think that's a possibility, but I also think there might be other people with possible motives as well. We'll get into that a little later. On November 2nd, 2015, a kayaker was on Rush Lake when he discovered a body. New Brighton police were called by the kayaker around 4:30 in the afternoon, and the water patrol had to be called to help recover the body. The person was so badly decomposed that by looking at the person, you couldn't tell their age, race, or sex. The body was quickly identified as Henry McCabe's through dental records. When he was found, his cell phone was in one pocket and the phone's battery was in the other. He also still had on his wedding ring, $15 in his pocket, and the wristband from the club. His brother Timothy said, quote, "What I can say is that we are hurting from what we have discovered. We are grateful that we were able to recover him. It's my wish to know what happened to him. The family may never know." End quote. The police said his death did not seem to be suspicious, and there was no sign of foul play. Henry didn't have any injuries that would lead them to think so. However, I do want to read to you this article from the National Library of Medicine. This was published by Dr. James L. Caruso, and it's titled Decomposition Changes in Bodies of Water. The whole article is very interesting, and I will link that in the show notes as well. It really makes me question if there really were injuries on Henry and they just couldn't be detected anymore. The introduction to Dr. Caruso's article states, quote, "The accurate interpretation of postmortem changes is an essential skill for any forensic pathologist or medico-legal death investigator. That being said, postmortem changes can assist or hinder a death investigation. Perhaps the most beneficial feature of postmortem change is in assisting with estimating the postmortem interval. Through the imprecision of this estimation is well recognized and should be taken into account. Characteristic changes that occur to a body after death follow a somewhat predictable timetable, and placed into the context of the death scene and witness accounts, as available, provide the investigator with a rough estimate of the time of death. On the other hand, postmortem changes alter the appearance of the body, making wounds and other evidence of the body's interaction with the environment more difficult to interpret or even recognize. Artifacts introduced by decomposition obscure external morphologic features of the individual, and putrefaction alters key autopsy observations such as organ weights and tissue integrity. Advanced decomposition may completely preclude any detailed gross or histologic examination of major organs. Establishing cause and manner of death for bodies recovered from a liquid environment, typically from water, is challenging enough without the additional complexity of interpreting post-mortem changes. One must first establish that the recovery location is the primary death scene. For example, a death may occur on land, and the body subsequently placed in the water as a means of disposal. Alternatively, a strong current or tidal activity may move the body a considerable distance from where the decedent entered the water. Particular attention should be paid to anything weighing the body down. External wrappings like blankets, curtains, sheets, clothing on the body, and the presumed circumstances that would have placed that body in the water environment. Once that is accomplished, attention may be focused on the condition of the remains, evidence of interaction between the body and the surroundings, and proper interpretation of post-mortem animal predation." End quote. The rest of this article is extremely detailed and informative. I do have to warn you that if you do go look at this, there are disturbing images in the article that some people might not be able to stomach. When Henry was identified the day after he was found, Revenue Commissioner Cynthia Bowerly stated, quote, "Henry McCabe was a respected and valued member of our revenue family, and we are heartbroken to hear the news of his passing. Our thoughts and prayers are with Henry's family, friends, and co-workers during this difficult time." End quote. Rush Lake, where Henry was found, was in the opposite direction of his house and a few miles away. The police believe Henry was intoxicated and walked quite a few miles, somewhere between 3 and 6 miles, to Rush Lake, and ended his own life. Some people have mentioned he likely would have sobered up during the time he was walking. if he was walking, because it only took him about 30 minutes to get to the lake, according to his phone pings that night. Plus, he passed up a body of water before getting to Rush Lake. No one around Henry thinks he committed suicide. The coroner concluded it was an accidental drowning due to there being no bruises, scratches, no knife wounds or bullet holes, or any other wounds, at least that he could identify. I'm sure the coroner knows his stuff, but after seeing the images of the decomposed bodies that were in the water for a long time in that article, I just don't know how you would be able to be 100% sure without a shadow of a doubt that the person didn't have any injuries at some point. But we also have to take into account that we don't know when or how Henry actually got into the water. Henry's blood alcohol level was 0.053. So yes, he was drinking, but would he have been drunk? The majority of sources think likely not. Let's get into the scenarios that could have happened. Could this have been an accident? It's possible. Could Henry have been drunk enough to stumble into the water, drown, while purposely or even accidentally calling Corrine and Timothy? Could the sounds have been of a person drowning? Rush Lake is 3.5 miles from the Holiday gas station. Now, on the YouTube channel, The In-Between, the host shows you a map, which I'll also post the maps and text messages to the socials so you can easily access them. But you can see the route that police say Henry would have taken. It would take an hour on foot to get to Rush Lake. He would have passed by another lake to get there. However, from the time of the gas station drop-off to his last phone ping, he was there in about 30 minutes. If Henry was drunk, would he be able to run that fast to the lake? It seems as if he got there by another means of transportation. The In-Between also shows you a video of people around that lake, and it's almost impossible for them to get to the water's edge due to all of the grown-up grass and vegetation. During the time Henry would have been walking to that lake, he also would have been sobering up. He had to know he wasn't going in the direction of his apartment. In fact, he was going 2 or 3 miles in the wrong direction. The accident theory just doesn't sit right with me. Around this accidental scenario, there are people who think maybe a deer or coyote attacked him and he fell into the water. But what do you think about the accident/animal attack theory? I'm not going to get into this theory, even though I guess anything is possible. There is a Bigfoot theory, but the In-Between YouTube channel does a pretty good job debunking that one. The next theory is one of the more obvious ones that a lot of people might think of right away. Did Henry take his own life? He reportedly did have a bad review at work around that time. The relationship with Corrine was definitely not the picture-perfect marriage as she tried to lead all authorities to believe. He was dealing with a lot, but his brother and other family members said he never had previous mental health issues, and they don't believe he would ever do that to himself and leave his children fatherless. Possible? Yes. Likely? The ones closest to him think not. It is true that people take their lives every day, and there are so many of those people we would never expect to do something like that. Some people do make decisions on a whim. However, why would he pass up one lake and go to another that's really hard to get to? How did he get there so fast, especially if he was even a little intoxicated? The next theory out of all of them is the one I suspect could be the most accurate out of all of them. As mentioned in the beginning, Henry's father was a politician back home in Liberia, and he was assassinated. Henry and his brother Timothy moved to the U.S. to California to escape. Corrine told police that Henry was offered a job in the Liberian government. We know Henry publicly talked about wanting to go back home and be involved in politics like his dad. He was very much involved in Minnesota's Liberian community, and he was really passionate about Liberian politics. Henry wanted to eventually run for president in Liberia after he got his master's degree in accounting, a CPA license, which Corrine told Gregory Evans he had his CPA exam coming up soon, and he also wanted to have a little money saved up. That was his big dream. The Liberian community in Minnesota believe there are political ties to his death. The In-Between on YouTube also revealed information about an informant who was communicating with an FBI agent and the Mounds View police. This informant was apparently really close to Henry. The informant said that Henry had been bringing up Liberian politics way more than usual around the time of his disappearance. In late September, at one of the searches for Henry, the informant was there and saw 4 men standing in their own little circle, talking to each other away from the crowd. These men were identified by the informant as Kennedy White, Jayla Kelsey, Kelvin Johnson, and Emmanuel D. Emmanuel was the guy who had the barbecue gathering the day before Henry vanished. Any conversations I bring up between the informant and these men are all alleged. The informant claimed he went up to the 4 men and they went silent. The informant said to Kennedy White not to be confused with William Papoose Kennedy, and he said, quote, "I know what happened to my friend." Kennedy only responded that he was in Connecticut at the time all of this happened. Later, the informant calls one of the other men, Jayla, who says, quote, "I wasn't there, keep me out of it." When the informant talked to Kelvin Johnson on the phone, he allegedly said he wasn't going to talk about anything regarding Henry over the phone. Finally, the informant talked to Emmanuel D. and asked him what happened at his barbecue before Henry disappeared. Emmanuel replied that he wasn't getting involved and he refused to talk about it. The informant allegedly tells him, quote, "William Kennedy, your friend, killed my friend, and I want to know why." After Emmanuel wouldn't say a word, his brother called the informant and said they can't discuss anything over the phone. It had to be in person. The informant agreed to meet up with Emmanuel's brother. Calvin Johnson allegedly talked to the informant as well and asked, "Why are you saying William Kennedy killed Henry?" The informant replied, "I'm saying it because it's true and you know it." We don't know what happened from there. Did the informant meet up with Emmanuel's brother? What did Emmanuel's brother say if they did? Is it something the police are holding close to the vest to eventually use? It's been quite a few years and there has been no more movement on the case. It seems like so many people know or might even have an idea of what happened from hearsay, but we may never know the whole truth. This is the theory that I believe most. The last piece of this theory is what the informant said they heard on the voicemail. They said they could hear Henry say something about Lofa County, which is where his home is in Liberia. They also said they heard Henry say he has VOO, as in voodoo, implying that if anyone harmed him, they'd be possessed. At the end of the voicemail, the informant said Henry was screaming for help. Lavetta Tugbe of the Coalition for Justice in Liberia even said regarding Liberians who have immigrated over to the U.S., quote, "They've done it for years. We need to find out what happened." I think this whole theory would better explain the FBI's involvement in a case that was at the time of a missing man. The last theory is also very plausible, which is the possible involvement of his wife, Corrine. She told the hacker-for-hire team, the police, and others that she and Henry were a happily married couple and painted a picture that wasn't the complete truth. She claimed the plan was for Henry to move to California with her and their daughters around the time of his disappearance. Well, if that's true, why had Henry not put in a notice at his place of employment? Why was he not taking any of the obvious steps, like packing up his things? We know Corrine had spyware on his phone since 2009. She knew Henry was cheating, and he was talking to women via email. He and Corrine had been arguing, there were trust issues, and Henry had mentioned the possibility of divorce. Henry removed her from his life insurance policy, and after he disappeared, her name was back on it, and the signature was not Henry's handwriting. Corrine also sent some horrible text messages on the 6th before Henry went missing. I'll post those to the socials so you can see the text for yourself. But I think the text, whether she meant them or not, in hindsight especially, look bad. When Henry called her that night and she heard those sounds, she didn't even call him back. Hackers for Hire found out that she was allegedly in Minnesota the day Henry vanished, using a Google number to make it seem like she was in California, and she flew back to California after the fact. She was back in Minnesota on the 10th of September. All of that combined looks really bad, and the phone calls she had with Gregory Evans make her look suspicious too. Of course, all the links will be in the show notes for that and more. My mind goes in so many different directions with this case. Could the closest people to Henry have had a hand in his death? Or at the least, likely know what happened to him? I have to believe that some do. Thank you so much for listening to the strange case of Henry McCabe. What do you think happened to Henry? Until next time, stay safe, stay aware of your surroundings, and keep warm.